Welcome to Alligator Preserves, everyone. I am your host, Laurel McHargue, and I have a return guest with me today. Her name is Miriam Green. Hi, Miriam.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I want to tell you all out there listening that I met Miriam a little over 4 years ago when I first interviewed her. She had written a book called The Lost Kitchen, Reflections and Recipes from an Alzheimer's Caregiver. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But let me just give you a little background about my friend Miriam, whom I've never met in person, just over Zoom, which thank God we can still do this, right? You were born in London, but you grew up in Bethesda. You went to college in Ohio at Oberlin. You met your husband in DC, and then the two of you decided to live in Israel. And you've been there for 33-ish years now.
Yeah, almost 32, I think. Yeah.
32 years. So this might be one of my more difficult interviews and visits because of what's happening right now in your world, right? So I would like to start with um, what have you done today? What has today looked like for you?
So today I had a little bit of work, and I'm a freelancer, so I work from my home. And then this evening, my monthly poetry group met. We're part of an organization called Voices Israel, people who are writing in English in Israel. And one of our members is a woman named Judy Weinstein Haggai, and she lives on kibbutz near Oz. And that was one of the kibbutzim that was the hardest hit on October 7th by Hamas terrorists. And she and her husband are presumed to be in captivity. So this was a very bittersweet meeting. She wasn't there. Her beautiful smile wasn't there. She is a gentle woman who loves haiku, and we read haiku in her honor and read some poetry that some of us in the group had written, mainly using Judy as a catalyst for writing our feelings. And it was very emotional. And we hope and pray that when we next meet in December, she will be with us because that's where she should be.
Do you have any of the poems with you? I didn't ask ahead of
I,
time.
I do. I do actually, and I can read you one of Judy's. Um, I can read you one of Judy's. It's
Please.
called, yeah, it's called Who's Awake? And this again is by Judy Weinstein Haggai. Who's awake? Who's awake writing poetry? Who's shouting the unspeakable? Who's ramming sound into silence? Who's pushing past decibels? Who's wailing into deafness? Who's sweating through nightmares? Who's embracing emptiness? Who's reaching for camaraderie? Who's alive in the maelstrom? This was not written recently, but
Wow.
poetry has a tendency to change and transform when it's up against events. And I really feel like this poem speaks to where we are now and how we're feeling here in Israel.
Yes. And you mentioned poetry, and what is incredibly unique about your book, The Lost Kitchen, is that it's prose, it's poetry, and it's recipes. I'll have a link to the interview that I did with you back in July of 2019, I believe, and where you go into a lot of what you wrote in here, and uh, the most unique book I've read in a long time. So I am sorry for your friend. You and I are both mothers of sons in uniform, right?
Yes.
Can you tell me what happened to your family on October 7th?
Yes. So let me see if I can set the scene. It was Shabbat, and it was also the last holiday in a month of Jewish holidays, the holiday of Simchat Torah, the um, sort of the giving of the 5 books of Moses. We read the last chapter in the scroll. We scroll it all the way to the end, and then we read the first chapter of Genesis, meaning we scroll all the way back to the beginning. And it is a marvelous, joyous holiday. And as an observant Jew, I cut myself. I don't use electricity. We have our lights on a timer. We have a hot plate that comes on to warm our food on Shabbat. I don't turn any knobs. I don't turn any lights on. I don't use my phone or my computer. The day is very much oriented to family, to praying in synagogue, and to eating lavish meals with family and guests. And so there we were. It was Shabbat. I have a phone that I keep on because my father lives close to me, and in the past he has needed me. And if he needs me, he will call, and I will answer. That is the unspoken word between us, that if I see the phone ringing and it is my father, I will always answer because he might need my help.
Yeah.
So it's Shabbat. And let me just talk a little bit about Israel. Israel is probably about the size of New Jersey.
Okay.
And we have a population of about 9.5 million people. I live in Beersheba, which is both the biblical home of Abraham and the modern capital of the Negev Desert. And we are about 30 miles from the border with Gaza. Not a long way.
No.
For years and years, we have had occasional rockets launched at our city by Hamas terrorists who live in Gaza. And have openly stated that they want to destroy Israel. And we've complacently lived with that threat. We have built a lot of houses have a room in their houses. We have a room like this that we recently built, which is reinforced concrete, and it is so thick on the walls and the ceilings that a rocket launched from Gaza, if it hit, we would be protected inside it. So for years, we have known that when we hear the siren, we go into our safe room, we close the door, we wait, we hear the booms, and we wait 10 minutes because sometimes there's falling shrapnel, and we want to avoid being hit. And so this Saturday, at about 6:30 in the morning, the sirens went off. And we all went into the safe room. The light was not on because we did not expect to be using the safe room. You shut the door, it is completely dark because the windows are closed. There's a reinforced steel window, and the door is also reinforced steel. And we sat there, and then there was another siren and another siren, and my phone started ringing. So when I came out of the safe room, I saw that it was my daughter in LA. My daughter knows not to call me on Shabbat, but she was calling and calling and calling. I sent her a message. I said, we're fine. And she kept calling. And I finally picked up the phone and she said, stay inside and lock your doors. And even then, we didn't understand the full scope of what had happened or what was happening then at that time on the 22 or so small villages and towns along the border. So we knew something was wrong. The rockets keep coming. My daughter says, stay at home. And, you know, we weren't exactly sure what we were supposed to be doing. And then the next thing that happened, we later learned that that more than 3,000 terrorists had come through the border, a border that we, I guess, with hubris, thought was defensible because we were using technology to protect ourselves, but it wasn't. And the terrorists knew exactly where to hit. They took out the communications bases, and they basically destroyed the whole army infrastructure. And any army units that came then to protect the citizens, it was all individuals who basically put on their uniforms, took their weapons, and went to defend the citizens of our country. And they made it to larger cities close by, one called Ofakim and another called Sderot. Again, they are, 20 miles away. And so it was clear that something was terribly wrong. And I keep hearing details about the events. Horrible details. One of the individuals, a forensic specialist, it has taken up till now to identify some of the bodies because they were so badly damaged that only teeth are left. And one of the members of this team said that a body would come in and they wouldn't be able to recognize whether it was a man or a woman because they had been so sexually assaulted. Apparently one woman's pelvis was so crushed from multiple rapes that her legs were at a strange angle. There were babies beheaded, tiny little bags, that they had to identify. Children and parents who were tied together and burned together. Horrible, barbaric events. And when we finally turned the news on after the holiday ended, the Sabbath ended, we were shocked to discover what had happened. One of the other things that happened on that Saturday was that my youngest, I have 3 children, my daughter who is in the States and 2 sons. And my youngest was with friends in Jerusalem, which is about an hour and a half drive away. And as we were sitting around our Shabbat lunch table, he walked in the door. He does not travel on Shabbat, and I did not expect to see him. But he was called up, one of 350,000 men and women who answered the call to immediately go into the reserves and do what was ever necessary, whatever was needed to try and right this wrong. As I said, we complacently lived with this violence for years. And I think that the events of October 7th were a wake-up call that no matter how hard we try, we cannot bend their swords into plowshares, and we must defend ourselves, and we must destroy Hamas as an entity living on our border. Our lives have been irreparably changed by the events. I'm not okay, and I don't know when I will be.
I remember emailing you right after we saw the news here. And again, I'm talking to you from Colorado, from beautiful, safe Colorado in the mountains. And I remember, asking you if you were okay and the response that you gave me. And I'm trying to deal with what you're dealing with again as a mother. Um, Tell me how your son, who was called, is handling what's going on. Have you been able to communicate with him?
Absolutely. So there's a phrase in Israel that if your son calls to say, I'm turning off my phone, it is a signal that they are going into Gaza and will not have an ability to contact you. Thankfully, so both my sons are were deployed. My youngest is most recently out of the army. He's 24. He is now in a unit with 40-year-olds. He says it's very interesting to integrate, his aged individuals with all these other, family men who have come back to their unit. And he is near the West Bank city of Jenin. I think of Jenin as a hornet's nest that thankfully has not yet been kicked open. I don't know if it will. I do know that there is a lot of tension. There are terrorist attempts coming out of the West Bank, and the army is trying to keep a lid on it. So that's where my younger son is. My older son is in the Home Front Command. He's on a base in the city of Akko, which is, if you think of the coast of Israel, it's above Haifa. It's not too far from his home, so he thankfully is able to get home and help his wife with their 3 kids, which is difficult. Schools had been closed for quite a while, for about 2 weeks, at least 2-3 weeks,
In all
and
of
then
Israel? Is this
in
in
all
all
of
of
Israel, everything closed down for the first few weeks. Everything closed down. I would guess that I wasn't in the States on 9/11, but I'm guessing that it was that same kind of terrible mourning and vulnerability, and what's going to happen next, and am I safe? And the safe room that we thought was safe was not safe, and the army that we thought would protect us was not there. And you have all these thoughts and feelings and rage. How could people do this to other people? So
tell me why your safe room wasn't safe.
so along the border communities, these safe rooms are to protect us, but they don't have locks. And so the terrorists that got into the houses of all these different kibbutzim, these collective communities, were able, in many instances, to open these safe rooms and pull out and shoot and destroy families. There are cases of there was one couple with 10-month-old twins, and they hid their twins and then tried to battle and stave off the terrorists. They were both killed, and the twins, thank God, made it out alive. They were found maybe 10, 12 hours later. The scope of the catastrophe was not even understood while people were running to protect, while soldiers were running to protect the civilians. So that's why there's this feeling that something failed. We failed. Whoever it was, there's going to be a reckoning. It's not going to be now, but there will be.
You talk about both men and women being called to service. Is this what are the requirements for able-bodied people in Israel as far as the military goes?
Right. So we actually have a draft. Young people who are of the age of 18 are drafted into the army for almost 3 years, depending on where you end up serving. There is a parallel track where young people can also do what we call national service, which is not military oriented, but helping in communities, working in schools, working with mentally challenged adults and children, many different ways to serve the country. It doesn't have to be in the military. My daughter, when she went in, she was a non-commissioned officer in charge of soldiers' rights. So she would visit soldiers' families and help them with extra funding if they needed it. My oldest son, who he was in a base in the northern city of Sfat working on computers. So there are many different ways to serve. My youngest was our only combatant. He's a sharpshooter, and whatever that entails when he goes out on duty. So when all this, you mentioned my book. My mom has Alzheimer's. She's had Alzheimer's for about 13 years. And about 3 years ago, we moved her into a facility here in Beersheba, where I live. And I had no time to think about her or what was going on in her facility. But they were under the same constraints as we were, with rockets being fired. Thousands of rockets were fired towards Israel. So in her house, there's a 3-story building where she lives. The workers there are from all different places. So you have foreign workers from Nepal and sometimes India and Thailand. And you have workers who are Israeli who speak Arabic, Russian, Hebrew. So there's a real mix of people who are taking care of these individuals, these residents in her home. They immediately brought the people on the 3rd floor down to the 2nd and 1st floor, because it's much safer when you have to deal with rockets. And during the day, they keep them in the main, I guess, the main room of the building that doesn't have any windows.
Mm.
So that was how they dealt with it. And, you can find heroes in so many places. And I have to hand it to all these staff members who kept their cool and kept taking care of, with love and gentleness, the patients and the residents in my mom's home.
Have you seen your mom since October 7th?
I have. I saw her. I usually visit on Fridays. My dad goes once or twice a week, and I have Fridays that I can go see her. And I guess this is a good time to tell you about one Friday where we did 3 things that, to me, speak to what memory is, and how our minds work, and how we are trying to live within this new world that we've entered. So it was the first time my youngest was home on leave. He had 24 hours. I can't imagine the cognitive dissonance that he was experiencing, traveling from his base to his lovely, room where he has his own bed. And, we showered him with love and food, and it was because he was going back on a Friday afternoon, I was actually able to bake him cakes and challah, and I sent a whole bunch of stuff with him back on the bus. And it was very hard to say goodbye to him, not knowing what he was doing and where he was going. So we dropped him at the bus stop, and then we drove about 15-20 minutes to another small city near Beersheba to pay a condolence call. In the Jewish tradition, right after someone is buried, there are 7 days of mourning, where hopefully the family is together and they can mourn their loved ones. And this was a delayed mourning. The family that we went to visit, Ilan and Rachel Troen, My husband knows Ilan from his work at Ben Gurion University of the Negev here in Beersheba. And their daughter and son-in-law were killed on their kibbutz Cholit. They died protecting their 16-year-old who was injured by the bullet that went through his mother and into his abdomen. And he was on his own for about 12 hours before he was rescued. He had his phone on. His grandfather, Ilan, was in touch with him, as were other family members, including medical professionals, to try and help him with his wound. He first hid under their dead bodies. And then they helped him figure out to move into the laundry room and cover himself with laundry. The terrorists kept coming back into the house. They set fire to the house. And when Ilan finally saw his grandson in the hospital, he couldn't believe it was his grandson. His grandson was black from head to toe with soot from the fire. So we didn't talk to the grandson, but we did talk to Ilan and Rachel. And we talked about their husband, their daughter, Dvorah, and her husband, Shlomi Matias. And Rachel, I couldn't believe how amazingly strong they were. It was a delayed mourning because the body of Shlomi was found and identified very quickly, but the body of Dvorah was misplaced for a while. And they decided that they should be buried together and they should be mourned together. And so it was almost a week after the events of October 7th before they received her body for burial. So this is trauma upon trauma upon trauma. And they were so strong and they were so amazing and truly inspirational. And Rachel told us about a poem that she has read many times since she received news of her daughter's death, that to her exactly described her situation. A poem by Wisława Szymborska, who was a Polish poet who won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1996. And I can read it a little bit later if you want. It's called Life While You Wait.
Do you want to read it now or later?
Let me just, yes.
Get through.
Yes.
Get through the rest of this day. Get through the rest of this day.
We dropped our son at the bus station. We went to pay this condolence call, and then we went to visit my mom. And so we went to an event of heightened and active memory, to a complete 100% non-awareness of these earth-shattering and horrible events. And there was my mom, placid, talkative, as she likes to be, and oblivious to everything happening around her. And so you don't talk about what's happening. You push those emotions away, just as when you're dealing with little kids. When we've helped take care of our grandchildren over this period of time, we put our phones away. We do not listen to the news. We do not watch the news, and we are the guardians, and we keep that blackness from them. And
How
that's
old
what
are
we
they?
did. The oldest is 7. We have a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old, and an 8-month-old. So it reminds me also that there are peaceful, quiet places in the world, and also sometimes in our minds, that are not at war, which is a nice thing to remember.
Did you sing when you were with your mother? I know you talked about song a lot.
Yes, my mom loves music. I actually sing a lot of nursery rhymes with her, British nursery rhymes that she taught me when I was a baby. So those are very ingrained in her memory, and she still remembers some of the words and nods along when she is focused on the music as well. So that's a good thing. Sometimes I think it's a good thing not to know what's going on.
Right. When you dropped your son at the bus or while he was home for those 24 hours, what did you learn about him?
He he was in such a good place. He just finished his first year in a music college. He's getting a degree in um, music and education. He plays the guitar, he writes songs. He was in a great place. And I saw that this wall had come down and he was steeling himself and pushing his emotions away. My oldest son said that it's okay. He needs to do that. And my youngest is my most sensitive child, but he cannot be sensitive in this moment. And so I saw that and I worried about it. I worried about the after effects of what this will do, not only to him, but I think it is a national trauma, just as, say, Cambodians experienced under the reign of terror in their country, or Chinese under the reign of terror in their country. There is a national trauma going on in Israel. Everyone is connected with someone who was killed or who was taken or who is in as a soldier right now in Gaza. And it's a very personal war.
And there's no end date. There's no you're going to redeploy and go home on this date and you're going to be done with your mission. There's none of that, right?
Oh. I want to say, and I don't really want to get political, and I am very focused on what it means to be Israeli at this moment. But Israel is not fighting the Palestinian people. We are fighting Hamas, who is a genocidal militant terror group that uses Palestinians as human shields because they know our soldiers will not indiscriminately kill civilians.
Yeah.
I know that the Palestinians are not in a good space. I know that. But if you ask Israel, if you ask me if I want a ceasefire, I tell you no, not until we have eradicated Hamas and their deadly tunnels and everything they own. That we cannot live anymore in complacency with them on our borders. We cannot. And we are committed to destroying Hamas physically. I think as an ideology, it is much more difficult. But we can't go back. We cannot go back. And yeah.
And so what can you do as a single person, mother of soldiers? What can you do?
So I'll tell you what I can do. I can talk to you. I can. So I have, even before the war, I had started volunteering in a couple places, but I'll tell you about one of the places that I volunteer, and that is the new local zoo. And it is a zoo that the animals are specifically from the African-Syrian Rift. So, you're talking lions and zebras and giraffes and beautiful birds of prey and some cheetahs and monkeys and crocodiles. No, alligators, I think, not crocodiles. One or the other. And just as every other institute was affected when the war started, so was the zoo. And people were called up, and a group of national service young people were not allowed. They were told they could not go back into the zoo. So as a volunteer, I stepped up with a friend, and instead of working with the animals, I'm part of the bird contingency. I help feed some birds. I've loved feeding pelicans and cormorants and horned owls and these beautiful red buzzards. Just it's amazing to be in cages with them. And it's a zoo that has worked hard to take in animals that have not done so well in the wild or in troops. For example, the cheetah had some sort of limp and was excommunicated. The hippo also that we have, and we're waiting for another hippo. I don't know when that's going to come, but this hippo apparently was also ostracized from the rest of the hippos. So it's, and our lions are 3 siblings that are white lions. They could not ever survive in the wild. So, you know, there's a lovely book that was written for young people. The One and Only Ivan. And there's a line in that book that good zoos are how people compensate for their treatment of animals. So I'm hoping that this is going to be a good zoo. It's not even opened. It was supposed to open right after the end of October, and that just didn't happen. So so the war started. There was no one working, and a friend and I stepped up, and we entered the kitchen, and we learned how to make what I lovingly call fish and chicks for you know, we learned that the male lion has twice as much to eat as the female lion. Some birds need chicken cut into little pieces. Other birds can eat, you know, a quarter of a chicken. Some birds like big fish, and other birds like small fish.
You haven't had to chew any of the food, have you, to put it into some
Thank
of the
goodness. Thank goodness. But we're also cutting fruit for the fruit bats and other animals. So that's what we've done since the war started. At least once a week we go in and we volunteer at the zoo.
Wow.
And
So this is your peaceful place, your place to escape the
I am
reality in
giving
a way.
I am giving to animals that don't ask, that need help and don't ask for it. And I am able to give with all my heart. And that's a really good thing. The other thing that's happened on a national level is that some of the people who were killed and taken hostage were people from Thailand who had come to Israel to work. And after October 7th, as you can imagine, most of the Thailand people wanted to leave Israel. So many, many, many farms are without their workers. And of course, the what we call the Gaza envelope, where this massacre happened on October 7th, is also the breadbasket of Israel. And there has been an outpouring of volunteerism among people who are able to go and pick avocados or tomatoes or eggplant or whatever it is, and work 1 day a week or 1 day in 2 weeks. Just this rotational outpouring of volunteerism. And I was very lucky to go with 3 other people, and we planted strawberry plants to help a family farm stay on its feet. So that was also very life affirming.
Are you seeing the impact of this in food and supplies that you yourself need to survive?
Not like in Gaza, but prices are going up. There is not yet a shortage of anything that I have seen. But I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how long this is going to last. So it's not clear. At this point, Israel is doing okay.
So your older son, you said he's near his family. How are his children dealing with the fact that their dad is, probably going out a lot more than he used to?
So many dads are going out a lot more than they used to. And a lot of mothers too. So they live in an area where there has been one siren, and in the neighboring cities there have been a few, but in their specific city there have not really been sirens. At some point, I guess about 2.5 weeks ago, their city decided that they were going back to school, and my daughter-in-law had to go back to work. She is a speech therapist and she works with special needs kids. But she had a dilemma. Her husband's in the army, so he's not with her in the mornings. She has 3 kids. She has to get to 3 different places, and the baby's facility does not have a safe room. And it was, pulling her in 3 different directions. The oldest usually rides a bus to school. Should he ride the bus? What happens if there's a siren? What happens if rockets are shot towards him? How will he react if he's by himself? He travels with his cousin, but all these questions going through your mind, and how do you figure it out? So they took it step by step. They moved the baby into a different facility where there was a facility right next door. So if there is a siren, she will be protected. But then there was this difficulty in getting her to be acclimated to the new facility. She didn't know the people. She'd been with her mom all this time, and her dad, when he was home. And getting her to a place where she was comfortable was very difficult. And it brought to mind, when I was with her, the fact that there are babies her age in Hamas captivity. 9 months old. 9 months old. And the mother is there too. But are they together? Is this baby being cared for? Is he getting enough food? The idea that my granddaughter had difficulty adjusting to a new place and a friendly, sweet, loving place. I can't even imagine what these families are doing and how these children are feeling. There have been 2 older women who were released, and one of the family members of one of the women said, she's with us physically, but her mind is not with us. And this was after 3 weeks, I guess, of captivity. So, I can try and start my life, and I can try and feel like I'm doing things that are making me feel there's a schedule and I am living, and then it comes right back round, and I am in that emotional morass again, because what was perpetrated against us was so horrific that we are having a hard time processing it, and it's difficult to move forward.
And yet you talked about those 3 unique events that happened on that day, between dropping off your son, doing the morning, and then visiting your mom. And you talk about how that's linked in your memory somehow. I mean, you're never going to forget that day. And in the midst of an ongoing war, you still have to move forward. And this is what you're doing.
The laundry has to be done. The dishes have to be washed. I have work to do. So yes, it is very difficult to balance all those emotions. I
And
have two friends who both have sons in the army, and we go out for coffee once a week if we can do it. And it gives us a chance to openly talk to each other and tell each other how we're doing and laugh and cry. And they are my anchors at the moment.
your father, how is he coping with everything?
So
How old is he now?
my dad is 85 years young. He's staying close to home. He's not going out very much. He still makes it to the gym twice a week, which I'm very proud of. He is with us Friday nights when we have Shabbat dinner together, and I am in contact with him every day. Sometimes I see him, sometimes I don't, but on Friday nights I see him. And he is trying very hard to be creative. He is an artist. I don't know that he's painted anything recently, but he has created these very interesting large insects out of household items, trying to keep himself busy. So
And so in the midst of this, Miriam, um, are you working on another book? Are you working on an annex to this with recipes for the animals that you're caring for? Or do you have enough poems to put out another book of poetry? Can you even have time to think creatively about, well, your poetry? You're doing your poetry monthly, which is grounding,
it,
I'm
it,
sure.
it pushes me to try and create, but it is very hard to be in that creative space, even though that is a comfort sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, should I read this poem by,
Please.
okay, and let me open it up. Hold on just a second.
And while you're doing that, for those of you listening, we're talking with Miriam Green, author of The Lost Kitchen, a book everyone should read, Reflections and Recipes from an Alzheimer's Caregiver. It's remarkable. You are a talented woman, and the way you are moving forward in the midst of war, right in your front yard, right in your yard, is an inspiration. So I hope that people will listen to this and feel some inspiration from you.
Thank you. I hope so. My computer is very sluggish today, so I am opening this. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is a poem again by Wisława Szymborska, and it is called Life While You Wait. And this was the poem that Rachel Troen, whose daughter was killed, told us meant so much to her after she found out about her daughter's death. Life while you wait. Performance without rehearsal. Body without alterations. Head without premeditation. I know nothing of the role I play. I only know it's mine. I can't exchange it. I have to guess on the spot just what this play's all about. Ill prepared for the privilege of living, I can barely keep up with the pace that the action demands. I improvise, although I loathe improvisation. I trip at every step over my own ignorance. I can't conceal my hayseed manners. My instincts are for happy histrionics. Stage fright makes excuses for me, which humiliate me more. Extenuating circumstances strike me as cruel. Words and impulses you can't take back. Stars you'll never get counted. Your character like a raincoat you buttoned on the run. The pitiful results of all this unexpectedness. If only I could just rehearse one Wednesday in advance, or repeat a single Thursday that has passed. But here comes Friday with a script I haven't seen. Is it fair, I ask, my voice a little hoarse, since I couldn't even clear my throat off stage. You'd be wrong to think that it's just a slapdash quiz, taken in makeshift accommodations. Oh no. I'm standing on the set and I see how strong it is. The props are surprisingly precise. The machine rotating the stage has been around even longer. The farthest galaxies have been turned on. Oh no, there's no question, this must be the premiere. And whatever I do will become forever what I've done.
Thank you. Miriam, this is our week of Thanksgiving here in the United States. And, sometimes I find it hard to believe that I am so fortunate to have the circumstances of my birth make me lucky, put me in a lucky place. This is going to be a hard Thanksgiving because of everything else that I know is going on. And I'm thinking of you, and you're one person among so many struggling right now. And I want to give thanks that you're alive, that your children are alive. What else can you tell our listeners today about anything you want to say?
Oh, I was buoyed by the recent demonstration in Washington, D.C., where more than 300,000 people came to support Israel. And I know that for Jews around the world, and even in America right now, there are fears that there's a resurgence in anti-Semitism, that people are supporting Hamas without thinking about their cruelty. And I am saddened, very saddened by all those events. So this demonstration was a real boost. And I hope that everyone out there who has questions about the conflict that's going on in the Middle East will sincerely look to find the nuances and not just see the black and white, because it is a very nuanced situation. And I think there's a way to come down against evil and stand up against evil and still support the idea of Palestinians having a homeland. And I hope and pray that individuals can see that, and that the actions that Israel is committing are not against the Palestinian people. They are against and in order to destroy Hamas, which is a genocidal terrorist organization.
What can we do? When I say we, me, anyone listening to this, what can we do?
There are amazing organizations that are supporting the war effort. I can certainly, there are more than 200,000 displaced people within Israel, meaning the people who lived in the Gaza envelope and the people who live up north on we didn't even talk about the border with Lebanon, where there are rockets being shot daily by Hamas and Hezbollah, another wonderful terrorist organization. So there are more than 200,000 displaced people within Israel. They cannot go back to their homes. They feel homeless and at loose ends. Many people's jobs have ceased to exist or to stop. They're not working. And kids who were in school, where do they go to school? There are kibbutzim. We have a friend down south on a kibbutz near Eilat. They have taken in double their population to help one of the settlements that was in the Gaza envelope. And there are centers where many of these people, say from Kiryat Shmona, which is the city closest to the northern border with Lebanon, there are two main central areas where a lot of people have taken refuge, often in hotels. So they don't have access to kitchens. They can't take care of themselves as a family. And they still have to figure out how to get their kids in school, how to keep their family going, their life going, and it is very difficult. So somebody who wants to help, there are many organizations to donate to. I can send you a list that we can post.
Please, please. Miriam, I'll be here if you want any more airtime for whatever good it will do. I too pray that people will educate themselves, and we all want this to be over. The whole world, I believe, wants this to be over and wants a resolution that's good for all innocents, all the innocent people, right? Because there are so many.
And the chant that is bring them home. Let those people go. Let them go. It's horrible. And it's horrible to think about where they are and what the conditions in which they are staying. It's just horrible. So bring them home. That is what we have been saying.
Okay. Listeners out there, this is my Israeli friend, Miriam Green. I wish I could wiggle my nose and bring your whole family right here to the safety of my home. And again, I feel so thankful, and yet I also feel guilt with that thankfulness, because why? Why should I be so lucky? I honestly feel that. Buy Miriam's book, The Lost Kitchen. Really, this is amazing. If you know anything about Alzheimer's, or you know anyone with Alzheimer's, this will help you. Miriam, you'll send me some links.
Will.
And I will post this on my website at leadvillelaurel.com. And please stay in touch. And I will continue to pray for you and yours, and all the people of Israel, and all the innocents caught up in this horrible, horrible war.
Thank you.
My best to you and your family. Give your husband and your grandchildren hugs, and we'll be in touch, okay?
Thank you, Laurel. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, Miriam.